We're continuing today with more laws of Rosh Hashanah, specifically more laws of the Shofar, in Siman Taf Kuf Pei Vav, section 586, which is called Dinei Shofar Shal Rosh Hashanah, the laws of the Shofar Rosh Hashanah. And so we've already spoken about the brachas on the Shofar blowing, we've spoken about when we do it, and now we're going to talk about the Shofar itself. Uvay Chav Zayin Ifim, in this section has 27 Ifim. You'll actually see that we're unfortunately missing parts of this siman. So we have 27, but at one point there were clearly many more. Because if you look in the corresponding siman in the Mechaber's Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, you'll see that there are many other sections, and we know that part of this section is, it'll actually be written in the Shulchan Aruch Chaser, it's missing. So let's jump right in. Aleph, Shofar Shel Rosh Hashanah mitzvasa sheyeh kafuf. The Shofar Shel Rosh Hashanah, it's a mitzvah that it should be kafuf, it should be bent. And there's an idea behind bent, kedei sheyichpefu es livam HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tefillah, because we want that the hearts of the Yidden, we want all of our hearts to be kafuf also, it should be, so to say, bent toward Hashem in tefillah. Now, jumping off the idea that it should be bent, the Alter Rebbe is going to make a general statement. V'chol hashofres hakfufim kasherim. All curved shofars are kosher. You got a shofar and it's curved, you're good to go. Obviously, that's a general statement, so we're going to have a lot of nuance to it. So the first point we're going to point out is chutz, some exceptions, mishal parda, mishal shur, except for a cow and except for an ox, mipnei she'eino nikra shofar ela keren, because the things coming out of their head, it's not called a shofar. We know what a shofar is, and if you've seen a cow or an ox at the zoo, what they have coming out is not that. It's a horn. Even in English, we call it something different. And the Hebrew word is keren. Shenemar, there's a pasuk that says bechol shoyrei, Bachar Shoyrei v'goymer v'karni reim karnov, and the pasuk connects that an ox and his horns are like the horns of a wild ox. It calls it karen, karnov. It's a different word. V'huadin karnei rei v'chayis sheheim etzem echad she'ein shamam shofar. And this is now kind of like a general rule about wild animals. When they have this one-piece horn, and we'll see what that means more specifically, it's called karen. It's not called a shofar, and therefore you can't use it. She'ein nikra shofar, because you can't call those things shofar. How do we define shofar? Ella. So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain. A shofar is karnayim hachalulim. This is a hollow, quote, quote, horn. Obviously, a keren itself we can't use. We just said that was excluded. But so I'm putting keren, a horn, kind of in quotes. So if there is such a horn and it's hollow, sheish lahem zachrus bifnim v'niklav gidin min hazachrus. So, and there's within it a outer part and then a part that so to say, that can be peeled off, then we can call it shofar. So shofar is something that has a hollowness within it, and in like biological terms, we'd say it has a membranous layer that can be peeled off. Goin, examples of animals that have it, shel kavasim, the elim, the izim. So sheeps, rams, goats, these are the animals we know of that have these shofar type structures on their head. Ki shofar hu miloshen shoferes. So you ever wonder where the name shofar comes from? From the Torah, you see it in the Siddur, you see it in the Machzor. But what does it really mean? It's from the word shoferes, literally a tube. So what does a tube mean? A tube means there's an outside, but there's nothing inside. It's hollow, and that's what makes something a shofar. Versus avo karne rei v'chayis, but the keren, the horn that's on the most animals, heim etzem echad. That's not a tube; it's one solid structure. And therefore, ufsulim afilu b'diavad k'moshel parah v'shel shur. They're not kosher to use. They're puzzle. You can't blow on a keren. You can make a hole and you can do whatever you want. It's not a shofar. Even b'diavad, even after the fact, it doesn't count. It's not a shofar. Beis, u'mitzvah min hamuvchar. The best way. You want to do the mitzvah the best way? Here is it. Liskaya b'shofar shel ayo. Use a ram's horn. Kedei sheyizkar lanu akedas Yitzchak, because this way Hashem is going to remember for us the akedah, the binding of Yitzchak. When obviously what happened, there was obviously a ram was sacrificed instead of Yitzchak. So the fact that we're using a ram's horn is going to remind Hashem, so to say, of akedas Yitzchak. Aval imein loy shofar shel ayo. Now what if you don't have a ram's horn? Yoytze b'shar minim. You can use any of the other kosher species. Chutz, again, but not mishal parda v'yotzei, but none of the cows, the oxes, none of the species that have a keren. Afilu bepashut im ein loy kafuf. Now, even if you can't even find a curved horn, you have one, so to say, sheep horn, and it's straight, not curved. Okay, you can use it. When the Alter Rebbe said you have to use curved, that's a chatchila. If you're going shopping in the store and you have a choice, okay, go with the curved one. But avo b'di'evet, but after the fact, im taka b'pashut, if you blew a straight one, okay, yatsa, you're good. And if you're in a situation where you don't have a curved one, like you're literally in shul, you're blowing shofar, this is what you have, that's considered a b'di'evet situation. So you're fine. You go ahead and blow the shofar. B'di'evet here doesn't just mean you blew the shofar and you looked after and, oh my goodness, I forgot, I didn't realize it had to be curved, or I didn't know it was straight, whatever it was. No, that doesn't have to be that extreme. If you're in a situation where you have to blow shofar and what you have in your hands is a straight shofar, you're good. That's considered b'di'evet. Gimel, shofar mibhema tmeya. What about a shofar from a treifa species? Yeshul fasel. No, that's possible. I feel a b'di'evet even after the fact. Lefi shelo huchshiru lemleches shemayim ela taharim bilvad. Because you can only use a kosher species when you're doing, so to say, work for shemayim. When you're doing a mitzvah, you're doing something for Hashem, don't use a treifa animal. Dalid, hagoyzel shofar v'tzakaboy yotza. Okay, so this is a more creative one. Someone doesn't have a shofar, so they're so from, they need to have a shofar, but they're going to steal it. So what happens? Believe it or not, yotza. It's after the fact, it works. You still got the mitzvah. Even if the original owner didn't give up hope that he's ever going to find it, because if you were creative, you might have said, "Well, I'm going to steal it, and I'm going to wait till the owner's miyayish it." He's despaired of it. He doesn't care that he's not going to get it back anymore, because halachically, then it's not his anymore. It doesn't even have to be that. Now, don't worry, this is not like the other halachas. We know a lulav you have to own. You can't steal matzah, tzitzis, etc. Why is that? We spoke about this in the last Siman. What is the mitzvah of when we blow shofar? Is it on the shofar itself, or is it on the sounds that it's producing? And we know, we spoke about even the bracha, it's on the sound the shofar is producing. Now, with lulav, what are you making a bracha on? The lulav itself. With matzah, what are you making the bracha on? Eating the matzah itself. With tzitzis, the tzitzis itself, etc., etc. But with shofar, you're not making the bracha on the shofar itself. You need a physical shofar to make the shofar sound, but the actual mitzvah is about hearing. It's about the sound, and therefore, obviously don't go around stealing the shofar, but after the fact, if it's stolen, okay. The sound is still a sound, and therefore it works. Ve'ein b'shmias kol din gazo, because the sound is not stolen. Shaharei shmiyase eina nageya b'shofar klal. And the sound is not, again, the sound is not the shofar. It's not intrinsically the same thing. Lofichach, afo pi shetaka bay b'isser gazo. Now, even though the sounding involves theft, right? You're using a stolen shofar. Kevan shebe'ikar ha-mitzvah dahainu hashmiya. But again, the main point of the mitzvah is the listening. It's not the shofar itself. Ein ba isser gazo. It's not itself, so to say, the sound is not part of the prohibition. It's not, the sound is not stolen. Yotza yidei chavasai. Hey, you did your obligations. After the fact, you don't have to worry. So if you're in a shul, you don't have to worry and say, maybe the Baal Tekeya stole the shofar. You don't have to worry. Even after the fact, you're kosher. Mikol makim. Kevan sh'al yidei gazo ba mitzvah elav. Lo yivarech elaha. But if you have a stolen shofar, and you're stealing, but somehow you're still very from at the same time, just know, don't also add to the Avera list. Don't add one more. Don't do a bracha levatala. Don't make a bracha on this one. Kedin mitzvah ba b'avera, because in general we have a rule. If a mitzvah comes through an Avera, we don't make a bracha on it. Shnisbar b'siman yud aleph, uv'siman tafresh mem tes, ayin sham. And the Alter Rebbe explains that in other simanim. So we weren't in this, in that sif, how to be a very from thief. So if you're going to steal a shofar, you have to remember it's kosher after the fact, but don't make a bracha on it, because we don't make a bracha on something stolen. Hey, mutar lital shofar shel chaverei. It's permitted to take the shofar from your friend, shloi midata, even if they don't know. In this one, of course, if a stolen shofar is, you can listen to the sound. then, or if you fulfill your obligation, then for sure, if you're just borrowing it from your friend, and this one you can make a bracha on it. Why? Demin hastam nayach loyla adam sheyasu mitzvah b'mamaynai b'davar she'eino echesron kiss. Because we have a general rule. Someone is okay with you using their possessions to do a mitzvah as long as it's not ruining it, as long as there's not going to have any monetary loss from it. So as long as you're not breaking the shofar, as long as you're not taking it, for instance, to another place and now he doesn't know where shofar is, most people are happy you use their objects for mitzvahs. So you can make a bracha on it. Shnizbar b'simin yudalid, ayin sham. Vav. Hatakei shofar sho avodah zara sho Yisrael. Now, what if someone sounded a shofar that was used in avodah zara by a yid? Kingoin shenishtachava l'shofar, like God forbid he was bowing down to the shofar, then lo yatsa. It doesn't work. If this was a shofar used for avodah zara, God forbid, you do not fulfill your obligation by hearing it. Mishum the shofar tzarich sheyeh bo tefach kamo sheyizbar. And the reason is because a shofar has to be a tefach big. What does that have to do with anything? Right? That's so confusing, it seems. The reason you can't use a shofar that was used for avodah zarah is because a shofar has to be a tefach big. What does that mean? The Alter Rebbe is going to explain this, so it's brilliantly interesting. V'zeh shehu oimid l'sarev. What's the halacha if something, God forbid, is used by a Jew for avodah zarah? You got to destroy it. You burn it. Shahari avodah zara shel Yisrael afilu im yivatulenu goy ein lemavuteles k'mo shezbar b'Yerdei Siman koflo lamed tes, as is explained in Yerdei in the sections about what you do with avodah zara. If an object was used for avodah zara by a Jew, even if he says, you know what, I'm giving it up, I'm giving it to a goy, it doesn't matter. It has to be destroyed. V'tzarich l'sreifa, it has to be burned. The chila oimid l'sarev harehu kivchar nisraf. And anything that is going to be destroyed halachically by a fire is as if it already has been burned. The im kain ein bo shir tefach, and therefore it doesn't have a tefach. Wow, this is like almost like a physics principle, like quantum physics. The idea that if something's going to happen in the future, it's already as if it happened now. So again, what is the Alter Rebbe saying here? The shofar that was used for avodah zara, the halach is it has to be destroyed. No matter what, there's no way back. It has to be destroyed. And therefore, as it's sitting in front of you, so to say, it's already destroyed. It's as if it doesn't exist. Since halachically, the decision is, the din is, it has to be destroyed, it doesn't exist. And therefore, if something doesn't exist, it doesn't have the minimum size. The minimum size, we're going to see, of a shofar is a tefach. And therefore, if it's destroyed already, it's not a tefach big. And that's the halachic reason why a shofar used for avodah zara cannot be used. Wow. Next, unfortunately, chaser, the next section of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is missing. And in the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo, of the Mechaber, you can see what's in there. And there's a lot about different shofars that are damage to it, different cracks, etc. And so we're going to have to jump back in now, right after, if we're looking at the order, assuming the Alter Rebbe follows the same order as Rabbi Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch, we're going to jump back in right after the discussion about a shofar that had a hole in it, and that hole is filled with like a glue, with some other substance, not shofar substance. So the best example I can think of is if you almost like plaster it closed, or if you still, put some type of patch on it with a different material. And obviously, that's not good, and the shofar is not going to be usable. However, in extreme cases, if you don't have any other shofar, as long as the vast majority of the shofar is still shofar material, it would be considered okay in extreme circumstances. And that reason I'm pointing this out is because Zayin starts out v'chein adin, and we have the same rule, so we have to know what the rule was before. So v'chein adin, im hasedek hu rachav ucheshem dabkoi uvedek nikar havedek bein hasedakim. So now we're talking about there's a crack in the shofar, and the crack is a big crack. And obviously, what do you do with the crack? You glue it closed. But here, this vedek, this glue, is noticeable. It's so big you can notice it because it wasn't a tiny crack. We're talking about a big crack. Bipneshu soisim es hachalal shebeneim dino kesisim nekev b'davar she'eno mimin hashefar shenizbar l'mayla. And this is the same halacha when you're filling the empty space between them with glue, as discussed above, presumably about filling with another foreign substance when there's a hole. So it's the same din that you can't do it. But in very extreme circumstances, I'm thinking like there's no other shofar, you have nothing else to do, as long as the vast majority of the shofar is the shofar material, then you could use it. Ches. Nistak miyut. Oirech HaShofar v'nishar reiv arko shalem v'lo bitko v'vedek v'lo chabra bar. Now what if, this is a different situation now, you have a crack in the shofar, but it's less than half of the length, so we're going the long ways on the shofar, and the majority is intact. And you don't need to, you're not gluing it together. You're like, okay, it's a little crack, but we'll be okay. So what's the halacha? So let's draw in on our shofar image, that little crack here, and then let's see what the first opinion is. Yesh aimrim shedinam kenikov shefilu lo nishtayr misyum hasedek ad makam nachas peh kedei sher shofar kasha k'mo sheyizbar. So here, the first yesh aimrim that says the shofar's fine, it's kosher, even if the distance from the end of the crack, so this piece here, all the way to the mouthpiece is less than the shear of a shofar, it's less than a tefach, you're kosher. Now, obviously, if the crack is way up and it's nowhere near it, you're going to say, well, whatever, it's fine, because you have, so to say, at least a tefach, you have a whole shofar's worth before it. But even if the crack is closer, so like maybe on the drum, let's make it even closer, it's still going to be kosher. Why? Because any sound that's coming out of the shofar is kosher, so it's treating the hole the same as a crack. Remember, this is an example where there's no glue. This is just a crack in the shofar. But this is not the only opinion. The yesh imrim she'ein adam lenikov nekev sheyesh by chesron miguf hashofar sheish makam laruach shemechal masatakili kanei sham derech hachesron. Because this is different. What happens when you have a hole in the shofar, a little hole? As you're blowing the shofar, some of the air is going to sort of say it's like an escape valve. It's going to come right out of there. And it's just going to act as an escape valve. There's no pressure on the shofar itself. But what's the difference now with when you have a crack on it? What's the difference when you have a crack? Pressure. Because what formed the crack, at least in theory, is some type of pressure within the shofar. So what's happening as you blow it? It's not going to be the same. There's nothing missing. Right? When you have a hole, you took out a piece of shofar. So again, it's an escape valve. But if you have the whole shofar still there, and in theory some type of pressure already opened it or made it crack, there's nothing missing. So as you blow more air in, you're adding more pressure. So what's likely going to happen? You're going to end up with a bigger crack. So you had a small crack in the shofar, and now it's going to be the whole thing. There's no place for the air to come out except through the crack. So the crack is going to crack even more. And before you know it, you're going to have a shofar that's all the way down cracked. And that's why, according to the second opinion, even the tiniest crack is possible, because once you start blowing, again, there's no material. It's not like a nekev. It's not like the hole taken out. It's going to keep cracking more. This is a similar thing to what we said before about the avodah zarah and the shofar not existing. Here, since inevitably it's going to crack, it's like you don't have a shofar at all. Now, what if you take a cord or a thread and you tie it really tight over the crack so that it can't crack anymore? Then it's kosher. You could do that. Because they're going to prevent it from splitting further. So what's the final halacha? This was complicated. Yesh lachmir kisvar achrayna. Be machmir like the last opinion. If there's even a tiny crack, don't use the shofar. Avo b'shas hatrak, but in a time of need, she'ein shofar acher, you don't have another shofar, what are you going to do? Matzo yesh then you can rely on the first svara, the first opinion, that you're okay. That you're okay. It's like the whole, which is kosher. All right. So let's erase this one, and let's go to the next halacha test. Now nisdak shofar l'rachbai. Now the crack is not the way we spoke about before. Now the crack is circumferential. So let's do it this way, like this way. Tahainu saviv hekefai, which is like surrounding. It's circumferential. V'im hasedek hu miut. Now, if it's a minority of the circumference, so like maybe in our picture it's only half, hekef hashofar nishtar reiv hekefo ba'osim makam shalem, and the majority of the shofar is still not cracked through, kosher. Afilu im nishtana kolo mikmois shahaya koidem shinistadak, even if the sound is going to be different. Right now you're going to have maybe a squeaky sound because you're going to have some of the air coming out from this crack. Shekoa kailes kashem b'shofar. This is an amazing cloud. Very important. We're going to see this over and over. All sounds that come from a shofar kosher. So whether it's going to be more squeaky, whether it's going to sound funnier, doesn't matter. It's a kosher sound. Vefilu ein basedek chesron meguf v'shofar she'ein shom makom l'rachtzes lefi she'ein ruach mastik yoser ela im kein nistak arkay. Now what about what we said before about the crack and there's going to be pressure because nothing is missing? That only applies to a crack that's along the length of the shofar, because when you're blowing, the way you're pushing air, it's going to push the shofar out. The way this crack is, it's not going to lengthen it because it can just go out the same way. So it's not anything like the previous one we said in Ches. Avo im loy nishtayr raiv hakefay shalem. Now what if this is all the way around? It's not a minority. It's almost the complete circumference. Im ein me'asedek ad makom menachas peh kadei shir shofar pasul. Now, if it's all the way around, we consider it basically as if the shofar is cut off. So then what do we have to do? We have to see how much space we have between the crack and the peh. So in other words, in this example, we have to measure the distance from, if this crack went all the way around, from there to the mouthpiece. So we have to know how long that is. If it's a tefach, we're good. And if it's less than a tefach, then it doesn't work. So let's see inside. And if it's less than a tefach, which is the shir shofar, then it's pasul. Because why? Because since it's cracked, we consider it as if it's already cut off, like I said before, and therefore you have to calculate from that point into the mouthpiece, which is the existent shofar, and see if there's a shir. Now, this we could say almost the opposite of what we said before. Before we said as long as the crack on the circumference is a minority, even if the sound changes, you're still kosher. Here we're saying we don't care if the sound changes. In fact, you could have the same exact sound. It can sound exactly like the shofar was before. Once it's the majority, it doesn't matter about the sounds. It matters how much space you have from the crack to the mouthpiece. That's the defining characteristic. Avo im yesh mehasedek ad makom menachas peh kadei shir shofar afa pi nishtana koloi mikam shahaya koidem shinistabe kasher. Now the opposite is true. If you have a full tefach from the crack to the mouthpiece, it doesn't matter if the sound is different. It's kosher. The afal pisha kil yoti derech hachelek shomalo mehasedek ein paisu moisim mishum kol shofar davar acher. Now, even though the sound is coming from the part above the crack, which you're saying is now almost right, we're considering that the shofar ends at the crack. So now you have the sounds coming out. Some of it will come out of the crack, but some of it's still going to come out of the wide ends of the shofar. So you're going to say, well, that's not even, so to say, the shofar. It's like an extra piece of bone that's attached. Doesn't matter. Ein paisum moisim mishum kol shofar v'davar acher. We don't paisum it. Oy mishum kol shnei shofaros. There's a halacha we're going to see later on that you can't blow from two shofars, and this doesn't count as that. The kevan shebeshas asiyas shofar haya zeh chelek mechubar, because when the shofar was made, it was once, right? We're counting it as if it's broken off, but practically it was one piece. They were connected to begin with. It was never separated previously. It's one shofar, and we're not going to puzzle it and call it two shofars. But we're not going to consider it one shofar in the sense that it's, so to say, it ends where the crack is, so we have to have enough shear before it. And again, the reason is because we consider when the majority is cracked that the shofar is, so to say, broken off there. All right, wow. Next, moving forward, now we have almost, so to say, an even more extreme example. Let me just erase that. All right. Next, dibek shivrei shofar ze im ze. V'yasa mehem shofar echad shalem pasul. Now, shofar, someone drops it, shatters into a bajillion pieces, and you're able to put them all together. No. That's puzzle. This isn't so to say, it's not a jigsaw puzzle. Lefisha ein ze karei shofar. You can't call that a shofar. V'afilu yesh b'shever shekeneged piv shir shofar shalem mikol tzadadav. Now, even if when it shattered, there was a piece near the mouthpiece, that was a large piece, and that has, so to say, a shear size. Nonetheless, doesn't count. Afal pi chen hu nifso me chamas hashvarim v'noisofim al shever ze shako yotzi derech sham. Why? Because all the broken pieces were added together, and these pieces, so to say, these former shofars, now they're just pieces, is going to produce the sound. This is now an example of almost two shofars, or bajillions, depending on how badly it was cracked and destroyed. Yud Aleph v'chein mitam zeh. Let's take this logic further. Im haisiv kol shehu al oirech hashofar shalem. Now, what if you take a whole shofar and you're like, I want to make it a little bigger. We're going to add a little bit to it. And now the sound is going to come out of this extension. Whether it's made from the species of shofar or from some other material, whether it's from the narrow and the wide, puzzle, doesn't matter. Mitam shenizbar, as we explained above, that's called two shofars. So don't add, you can't deluxe edition your shofar and add a whole section. Yud Beis. Hafachai v'sakabai. Oh, you reversed the shofar. You got very creative. No, lo yatsa, that doesn't count. Bein shehafachai kederech shehayfchin chaluk shehachazir penimius a shofar. Now, whether you're doing this by turning it inside out like you do with a coat, and that the lias penimius, that the inside is not the outside is the inside, no, that doesn't work. Or you're going to actually change the shofar. So you're going to take the wide end, and you're going to somehow, I guess, narrow it or leave it, but the part you blow into, you're going to widen. How do you widen it? You use boiling water. V'taka bein batzad hakatzar bein batzad arachav shaya katzar matchil lo yatzar. Either way, no matter how you're trying to play around with it, lo yatzar, it doesn't count. Whether you're going to make the wide narrow, the narrow wide, it doesn't matter. Lo yatzar, you can't do that. Why? Shnemar v'havarta shayfer v'goymer, because the pasuk says that v'havarta, that you're going to cause the sounds of the shofar. But that means kiderch she ha'avarsai. Avarta, which means that you like to cause, is also, so to say, avarta is like aver, to carry. Sheha'ayo me'aviroi b'reish mechayim. In other words, how the ram or the animal carried the shofar in the same way, which means prat v'hefech, not the reverse. to exclude the reverse. V'ayin Siman Tavkaf Tzadik, as is explained elsewhere. In other words, there was a narrow end and there was a thin end. You can't flip them. You can't play around with that. So there's no creativity with how you blow the shofar. You can't turn it around. You can't try to redo, make the narrow into the wide. None of it's good. Yud Gimel. Now, what if you took a long shofar and you cut it off short? As long as the tefach remains, that's fine. V'kama shir shofar, tefach. And what is that shir? It's a tefach. It's in English we say hand breath. Kadei sheyechazenu hatakei biyadoi. Why does it have to be a hand breath? So when you're holding, when the Baal Takei is holding the shofar in his hand, the hainu b'daud etzbaisav beinanim, when your four regular fingers, not the thumb, are holding the shofar. So right, they're holding the shofar. You could see the shofar from each end, because if it's a tefach long from the one side and the other side of the hands, you could see a little bit of shofar. Why is that important? Because a tefach is 4 thumbs wide, which is more than 4 finger breaths. Because you don't want to say that the guy blowing the shofar is just making a noise in his hand. You want to see the shofar. You're paying good money, like we said, right? Oh, actually, we had a machlekes about that in the other Siman. So let's assume if you could pay him. You're paying good money for Baal Takei. You want to get your money's worth. You don't want a guy making sounds on his hand. But what if you hired Oig Melech Bashan? He converted, and he's going to be your Baal Takei. You have Hulk Hogan, one of these guys blowing big hands. So my tefach, my 4 fingers is different than his. No. Doesn't matter if he's a big guy, and the shofar is now ein ner mitech yado. You're not going to see the shofar in his hand. Af al pi chen ein tzarech yeser mitefach shel adam beinani. We go by the intermediate person's hand, so to say, the hainu dalad gudalin, the intermediate person's thumbs. Umaydadim b'makayim harachav shel gudal, k'moshe yizbar b'siman aleph, and you're not going to start changing the the measurements based on different people. As explained previously, v'chein adin b'chol atzbos shabbat, and all the times in Torah law we speak about these measurements or finger breaths. We're not measuring them. We're is the person big? Is it small? Are we going to do Oig Melech Bashan's hands? It doesn't work like that. Now, Yodalid gerdu bein mi bifnim bein mi bachutz ad sheyasoy dak ma'id kamo geled kasher. Now, what if you're going to file your shofar, right? You're going to sand it, file it, inside, outside, and you want to make it very thin. Even you're going to make it so thin, it's like parchment paper. That's kosher. And you're saying, whoa, come on. When the ram was carrying this, it wasn't thin. That's not what we mean by how it's carrying. By the way the animal is carrying, it has to do with the wide versus the narrow, but not the thinness. And I'll tell you, you do any of the little kitty shofar factories, you see, you have to sand it down. You have to make it smooth. You don't want, there's little pieces of bone on the outside. You want to make it smooth. So that's what's done all the time. When we say carrying it, we mean the way literally it grows out. That's what we mean by the way it's carried. So we're only trying to exclude when you're reversing the way that it naturally grows on the rams horn, not to do with the thinness or whether it has to be, not sanded. Sanding it makes it nice. Tesvav. Now, just a little introduction to this one. The shofar itself, if you've been to a shofar factory, you know that the shofar doesn't start out is nice and hollow. It is tube-like, but there is still membranous, this kind of membranous material inside it. It's almost like marrow. And so the question is this: you have to remove it, right? You have to thin it out. But what if you do the following inside the text? Im haitzi hazachros mina keren. You take this membranous protrusion, this material out. The asam imenu shofar kigon shenikev by puzzle, and you kind of like push out of your shofar, and then you're going to hollow that out and make that your shofar. That's not the shofar that's possible. Because it's not. It's almost like a solid piece. Now you're making a hole in it. The shofar has to be the outside, the real bone that we use, and you remove the inner stuff, not the other way around. Shofar hu lashon shveiferes. We said before, what does shofar mean? Shveiferes, a tube. V'zachrus, and that membranous solid material. Kevan she'eno chalo b'tivay, since it's not automatically naturally hollow. Eina nikra shofar, we're not going to call it the shofar. Avo im loy haitzi hazachrus mina keren elo nakav b'nekev kasher. Now, what if you didn't take it out? You actually did the opposite. You're going to leave it in your shofar. And now, instead of removing out, you just kind of you poke a hole, you get some type of, tool, and you go all the way through, and that's what you're going to blow through. So you don't remove it out, you just kind of quickly thin it out. That's kosher. You could even do this to begin with, lasais kain. Ve'afilu hazachrus mafsik ben hakel hadavar hachalo b'tiva shenikra shofar in bechach klum. Because why? Because the sound is coming through the shofar itself. It's still coming through it, and this material is part of the shofar material, and therefore it's not considered like it's making a interruption. Because we have a general rule that when you have two of the same material, it doesn't make a barrier, so to say. And since this is part of the shofar material, biologically it's more membranous, it's different, we gave it a different name, but it's still part of shofar. And it's therefore as if this membranous stuff isn't there at all. Now, going off barriers, obviously then there's an issue with it. If we're saying that this one is okay, it implies that other barriers aren't okay. See, it's a beautiful segue the Alter Rebbe makes. Tezayin, sarich shelo yehei shum hefsek. Now, we're going to point out that even though this membranous material is okay on the inside, nothing else can really intervene. You cannot have any other interventions. No hefsek bein piyat hakela shofar. No thing that comes between the mouth of the person who blows in the shofar itself. Lefichach, im tzipahu zahav b'makay menachas peh k'dei shel na'isai. So someone puts a fancy piece of like a golden foil over the tip of the shofar. They're making it beautiful. They're going to beautify it. Afilu im hatzipoihu be'arich hashofar. Or what if the whole shofar, from the big ends all the way to the narrow ends, is covered in gold? Im hu miyad samuch l'roshei b'tzad hakatzar pasol. If it comes even to the ends where the mouth is going to be, it's possible. Because what's going to happen? The person who's sounding it, their mouth is going to a little bit touch the gold or the foil or whatever the adornments you're putting on it are. And then there's a barrier between the shofar and the person's lip. Now, if it's very far, like only we're saying, someone makes like a whole golden ornament here at the end, and it doesn't go anywhere near, okay, that's going to be fine. Not going to be an issue. Now, we're going to have some nuance to this. When do we say these whole rules we just said about the foil and at the end it's okay? When it's not going to change the sounds of the shofar. Or if we don't know if it's going to change the sound. Because usually, this foil is not going to change the sounds. Even if you don't know, we can be okay with it, because most likely it's not going to avo. But but if you know that this is something that's going to make it deeper or a higher voice, or it's going to squeak or something like that, even if it's going to make it a little changed, puzzle, then it's going to not count as a proper shofar blowing. Because then you're not hearing the sounds of the shofar. You're hearing the sounds of a shofar plus tin foil, or gold wrap, whatever it is. We said before that all sounds of a shofar are kosher, but we didn't say that all sounds of a shofar plus tinfoil are kosher. Yud Zayin Bamed Dvar Mamordim. When do we say this? Keshat Sipoyehu Haisaf Al Avia Shofar Ayal Rachbai. When this coating is, so to say, adding to the thickness of it. It's right, you're adding on the outside, and it's like a wrap. It's making it wider. But if you're trying to make it longer, even if you're doing it at the wide end, even if you added the tiniest amount, and it's going to lengthen it, the tiniest amount, we said this above. If you add anything to the end of a shofar, then it's possible. Even if you're saying it doesn't change the sound, it doesn't matter. We explained this all above, that you cannot add. It has to come out of the shofar itself. Yud Ches. Oh, so now you're an artist. And now you're going to decorate, and you're drawing pictures on your shofar. Lo yafa hein oisin. It's not nice to do this. It's not pretty. Even if you're not going to cover the whole thing with pictures, you're not making a tapestry, because sometimes it can change the sound, so don't do it. Now, although there's an exception. You can, so to say, make an engraving into it. It's not a drawing that's external, but you can etch into it, assuming you have a thick enough shofar bone. You could do it to make it pretty. Now, what if this changes the sound? Not important. Why? Because we don't have another sound. We don't have foil on it. We don't have bells on it. We didn't add another material. This is just the sound of the shofar coming out. What do we say before? If it comes out of the shofar, it's kosher. We'd use this when there was a crack, well, at least according to one opinion. Well, the issue with the crack wasn't necessarily the sound. If there's a hole in the shofar, as long as it's coming out of the shofar, and when you're engraving, you're not adding anything in. You're chipping away the shofar, but any sounds are still shofar sounds. Here chik es a shofar mat befiv v'nafach boy v'saka lo yatsa yidei chavasa kevan sheyesh hefsek mat bein piv l'shofar. Now, what if you're holding the shofar even a teeny bit away from your mouth, and you produce the sound? It's not a kosher shofar blowing. Why? Because that little space is now intervening. It's almost like the gold foil. Chaf, nasan shofar b'tech shofar. Oh, you are so from. We're not going to blow one shofar this Rosh Hashanah Kehillah. We're going to blow two. We're going to put one shofar inside the other shofar. Im shamako pnimi levad. Now, what if it was a big inside shofar, so to say, and the outside shofar is just kind of covering part of it. So you're blowing on the inside shofar, and the sound coming out is clearly coming from the inner shofar. All one. Exactly what I said. So again, if the inner one is going beyond it, and it's the inner one is what's touching the mouth, and if the wider end is either less than or certainly not more than the inner one, or if they're about equal, if the equal level, I don't know how you do exactly. So the nimsa she'en takeh zoi shum taruves ko mina chetzon eila mina pnimi levad. This situation is not really going to be mixing sounds, because why? You're having just the sounds of the inner shofar. So this time, it's weird. I don't know why you're doing it, but it's a kosher sound. Now, all this is true only if you're not changing the sounds of the shofar. But if you change the sound of it, now, but what if, the outer one is now either too close to the mouth, or it's too close to the end, or if they're equal? You don't know which one you're hearing now. Is the sound you're hearing from the reverberations from the outer shofar, the inner shofar? Lo yatsa. This is not kosher. To kol shofar echad amra Torah v'lo kol shnei shofaris. Again, what's the halacha? All sounds of a shofar in the singular or kasher. But now when you're doing two shofars, it has to be one shofar. Chaf Aleph. Kol davar ha'paiso b'yom rishon b'shofar, paiso gam b'yom sheni. Afal pi she'eno elam divreihem. If a shofar is not good on day one, if its sounds are disqualified because it's a double shofar, whatever it is on day one, same thing goes for day two. We don't say, well, it's derabanan, we're going to be mekel. We don't say such a thing. Chaf Beis. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah ein mechalim alav yomtiv. Now, to make a shofar, you're not going to be mechal yomtiv. B'pnei sheyomtiv hu aseh v'lo taseh. Because for yomtiv, we have both a positive commandment and a negative commandment. K'moshe nisbar b'siman tav tzadik ches. V'ein aseh the shofar doiche es lo taseh v'aseh. And therefore, the single positive commandment of blowing shofar is not going to override the positive and negative commandments associated with keeping yontiv. V'filu b'davar she'isuru eina eila midirabanan ein mechalim alav. Now, what if it's only a dirabanan? Only a dirabanan that you need to break? You still can't do it. Lefi shechachamim hishvu as divreihem v'shal Torah, because the chachamim buttressed their piskadinim, their laws, with the level of being on a deraisa level, Torah level. So they didn't want to make a differentiation. Ve'amidu divreihem levatal divrei Torah v'shei v'al taseh. And so they employ what's called shei v'al taseh. They're not telling you to break Torah law. They're not telling you to, God forbid, eat treif or something like that. But they're saying you don't have to go out of your way now to pursue a positive biblical commandment. In this case, shofar. They're saying just sit. You don't have to do anything. You're not going out of your way to break a Torah law, but because of a derabanan, you're going to shave, sit down, relax, and you're just not going to do shofar in this situation. Now let's put some meat to this. Chav Gimel Ketzad. Let's give some interesting examples. Haya shofar b'reish ha'ilon. Someone was playing a joke on you, and the shofar is at the top of a tree. They brought it to the other side of the river. And there's no other shofar. What do? You can't climb a tree. You can't cross the water in order to get it to you. Now a pile of stones fell on it. You cannot remove them. Which, right? You're going to say, okay, it's muksa, but nope, cannot touch the stones. You can't even go outside the Shabbos limits to get it in order to hear the shofar. You can't, certainly if you can't even go walk past it on your own to hear it, you certainly cannot carry the shofar back past the tchum. When do we say this? Al-Yidei Yisrael. We're talking about a Jew doing it. But if you ask a guy to do it, mutar lasos kol davar she'isuru eina ela medivrei seifrim. Because asking a non-Jew to do it is a dirabanan. Kigon la'alos ha'lilan. You can ask them to climb a tree. V'yai mechutz latchum. You can ask them to go outside the tchum v'chol re'etzi bezer or anything like that. Ovo asher loimer l'neichri lasait malacha gamura b'shviloi. You cannot, however, ask them to specifically to perform actual malachas, which implies deraisa malacha for you. But you can, so to say, combine these two dirabanams, the idea of asking a non-Jew and the idea of having them do a rabbinic action, something that's rabbinically forbidden. There you can double it over and you can have them do it. But what if they're doing a biblical for themselves? They're breaking, so to say, yontiv in a biblical way for themselves. They decide, you know what, I want to make my own shofar. After the fact, they can give it to you. You can blow the shofar. Even though in their mind they're probably doing it for a Jew. Okay. And the Chachamim weren't worried that you're gonna you figured this out. You're gonna tell a guy, okay, you're not doing it for me yet. Just think it's gonna be for me and make it. They didn't make an issur for this. The only time the Chachamim that they're concerned that you're going to do such a thing, that you're going to try to hint at someone, not even hint, you're going to maybe even tell them, and therefore they forbade it, is when it gives you some type of bodily satisfaction, some type of physical hana. But ein chayshashin shavar avera kedei l'kaim mitzvah. But they're not concerned you're going to do it to perform a mitzvah. So mitzvah isn't, so to say, for physical satisfaction, so they weren't concerned that you were going to do such a thing. Chav hey. Ba'amed devor amordim. When do we say this? When the non-Jew is making the shofar from their own supply of horns. The ein bay mishum iser neilad b'yamtiv. This is not the iser of neilad on yamtiv. Now, just to give a little background. In general, there's a concept on Shabbos and on yamtiv called neilad, something that wasn't there before and is now in existence. So whether it's a bird laying an egg on yamtiv, ice being made, something like that, something that wasn't there before is considered nylon. There's all different nuances to it and exceptions. So you might say, hey, there was day one, it was a horn. All of a sudden now it's a shofar. That's a new existence. It should be usher. We're saying no, it's not going to be an issue. Why? Kevan shebein hashmashos, because at twilight, when the, so to say, the counter starts for whether something's considered nylon or not. In other words, did it exist before Yom Tov or not? But at that time, as Yom Tov was starting, Haya Karen Biyad Nechri, it was a carrot and a horn that belonged to a non-Jew. And he didn't, so to say, divert his mind. He didn't change his mind about making a shofar. He was focused on it. And since it was his the whole time, he can do whatever he wants with it. So therefore, it's not considered nailad because he owns it. He could do what he wants with it. It's his business. Now, you as a Jew, you're going to go use it. That's on you. But the whole concept of nailad for him, didn't apply to him. Although, im asa nechri shofar b'yam tov mikeren shel Yisrael. But now, what if you have a goyish neighbor and he sees, this poor, they don't have a shofar Rosh Hashanah, we got to help him out. And you, as the Jew, have a huge supply of horns. Nah, it's not going to work. Kevan shebein hashmashas lo haya keren aymed asas mimena shofar, because when Yontif started, he didn't have the horn, he didn't have the shofar. You have the shofar, and you're not allowed to make it. So it wasn't in the realm of possibility that a shofar could have been made from it. It was not in the guy's possession. The im kain zeh shofar hu neilad b'yamtiv, and therefore it's called neilad. It came into existence. V'yasar hayisrael l'talto kedei l'seikabai. And therefore you cannot blow it, because this is not going to override even there's a category of rabbinic law that's not allowed on Yom Tov or Shabbos called shvus. And even this you cannot override to blow shofar. Mikol makom, imein sham shofar acher elahu mutar litzkaya bai. But what if there's no other shofar around? Then you can blow on it. So the Alter Rebbe is giving us a little get out of jail free card here. Because there is a opinion that you are allowed to use Neilad on Yom Tov for the sake of keeping a biblical commandment. So therefore, there is an opinion. We don't want to rely on this opinion. It's a minority opinion. But if we need to, we can rely on it in this situation. Chav Vav. Now what if the guy says, I know where there's a shofar. I'm going to walk it a few miles this way. I'm going to walk and get it. It's outside the tchum. Even if you brought it beyond 12 mil, which is according to some opinions, it's the deraisa, it's the scriptural tchum. I mean, it's a very far trip. Mutar litzkaya by af hayisrael shehuva b'shviloi. You are allowed to use that shofar. That's a good shofar. Afilu ha'imrim mechutz l'yud beis, even the one that came outside the yud beis mil. Yesh iser tachum min ha'Torah, even according to those who say that this is a biblical limit. Shehare davar haba mechutz tchum muter betilto. Why? Because even an object brought from outside that tchum, you're permitted to move it. So and what are you doing in your bol shofar? You're just lifting it up. So So what is forbidden then if it's outside the tchum? Well, you can't eat it, so don't eat your shofar. You can't have hana from it. You can't have enjoyment from it. The hainu v'yishtamesh boy k'moshi yizbar b'siman tavkov tezvav v'zeh shetakei boy tekei shal mitzvah ein zoy chashuva hana klal k'moshi yizbar l'mayla. And as we explained above, it's not considered a personal satisfaction, a physical benefit to hear the shofar. That's the halachic aspect of it. Nonetheless, no, very carefully he says, when they bring the shofar, you can blow it, but don't move it more than Dawud Amos, about 6 feet in any direction. As explained there, when something comes from outside the tchum, you can't move it outside your personal space, which is the Dawud Amos. Final halacha, chav zayin. Yachal liten b'seicha mayim o yayin kedei litzach tzachai. You want to clean out your shofar. You want it to smell nice. You need it to clean, whatever. You can use water and wine. That's fine. It's not v'ein zeh kimisakin kli b'yamtev. Don't worry. It's not considered repairing a kli. It was usable before. You're just cleaning it out. Avo meir raglayim, but urine af bechol aser mipnei hakavod. You can't use to clean it, even not on Rosh Hashanah. That's disrespectful. Nowadays we'd say it's a little bit strange. Definitely don't do it. So shkach that when this was a not an easy siman and certainly a long siman. So we reviewed all about shofar. So just a very quick summary, because I know we covered a lot. The shofar in Rosh Hashanah should be curved, and we said that all curved shofars are kosher, but then we added a lot of nuance to it. We said, well, it has to be a shofar, not a keren. A keren is a horn that comes from like a cow or an ox. Those are not kosher. Ideally, use a ram, because that remembers Akedas Yitzchak, but any kosher animal is fine. Don't use a treif animal. Now, if you stole the shofar, don't do it, but the sound is okay, but don't make a bracha on it. If you borrow the shofar, that's fine. You can use it and make a bracha on it. If it's an Avodah Zarah shofar, it's like it doesn't exist, because it needs to be burned, so it doesn't have a share of a tefach. Don't use it and destroy it. Now, then we went into all the types of cracks and stuff like that. So if there's a crack in the shofar and there's glue in it, we said then you shouldn't use it, although in extreme cases you can. Now, if there's a crack that's not glued, we went over whether it's the long ways or the circumference way. If it's the long way, we said then it doesn't matter in theory where it is, whether it's small, big, any crack is an issue at all. Don't do it. Although we did say that after the fact, you could tie a string on it and kind of keep it tight. And for the circumference around the width of it, if it's a small crack, then it's okay, as long as you're not going to, if it's a small crack, it's going to be okay. Why? Because nothing is missing. Even if it changes the sound, it's okay. Versus a crack over the whole circumference, we don't care about the sounds, but you have to have the minimum length after it of at least a tefach. We spoke about that if you crack your shofar into bajillion pieces and you try to put it all together, not kosher. We also spoke that if you try to add anything to either ends of the shofar to make it longer, it doesn't work. We said that you cannot reverse the shofar by making the wide end narrower, the narrow end wide. You're not allowed to do that. We said that, again, the minimum length is a tefach, so that when you hold it in your hands, you can see it from both ends. And this is the shear of a Beinoni, of a normal person. We don't worry about making a tefach bigger because you have a big guy blowing the shofar. We said you're allowed to file down the shofar to make it smooth. And we talked about that you should take out that middle membranous part of it. But even if you don't, if you put a hole from it, it's fine because it's the same material as the shofar. We said that nothing can be between your mouth and the shofar, no gold foil, nothing like that. And certainly not at the ends where it's going to make the sound big. We talked about making pictures onto the shofar, not allowed. Etching is in theory allowed, even if it changes the sound. If you hold the shofar a little away from the mouth, it doesn't work because that's considered a barrier between your mouth and the shofar. If you blow one shofar inside another, the only way it's kosher is if the inner shofar is longer on both ends, or at least on the other end even. We said that if the shofar is not kosher day one, it's also not kosher day two. We also discussed that you cannot break any aspect of Yontif to make a shofar, even the D'Rabbanans, with the one exception that if a non-Jew does it for you and breaks a D'Rabbanan, that's okay. or they could also have the shofar from beforehand, the horn beforehand, and they want to make a shofar for you. That's fine. They could also get it from outside the tchum, and then if that happens, just be careful not to move it more than your dawat amos. And finally, you can clean your shofar with water or wine, but not with urine. What a way to end the Siman. So these are incredibly detailed halachos. Be sure to review them and keep up the learning. This is amazing.